The smell came first, before anything had a name. Iron and wet leaf, and the soft, sweet rot of bones gone to soil under 200 years of rain. Old blood that had long since stopped being blood and become part of the dirt itself, the way a hearthstone becomes part of the room it warms. Mist clung low between the trunks, the kind of mist that did not move when the wind moved, and somewhere deep in it, a slow heartbeat that was not quite a heartbeat tapped against the inside of the world. The hollow wood at dawn had a sound to it the way wells had a sound, a held breath, a patience that did not belong to anything alive in the usual sense. Birds did not sing here. They went around. The deer went around. Even the rain seemed to angle past the canopy, as if the trees themselves had agreed long ago that whatever lived inside this grove would be fed only what the household chose to feed it, and nothing else was permitted to nourish it, not even weather. The path in was packed earth, worn smooth by generations of bare feet that had walked it once and never walked back out. There was a stake at the end of that path, hammered through a flat stone, and the iron of the stake had gone dark with the rain, and dark with other things. And around it the moss grew in a perfect shy ring it would not cross. Into this place, with the first thin gray of morning still trying to decide whether it was light yet, they brought the kennel girl. Her name was Athena, and she was 22 years old, and her hands smelled of straw and warm dog, and the lavender oil she rubbed into the cracked pads of pups too young to lick their own paws. She was small, narrow at the shoulders, her hair the color of wet hay, and her wrists were already raw from the rope that had hauled her out of the kennel block before any of the other servants were awake. The matriarch of House Vasari walked ahead of the procession in a riding cloak that did not flatter her. Her chin held at the angle a woman holds her chin when she is determined not to look like a woman who had her steward kill a dog and pour the rest of the vial into the cot of an inconvenient girl. Behind the matriarch came her son Kevin, 24 and golden and ruined in the small ways young men go ruined when no one has ever told them no. And behind Kevin walked the steward Alvin in his neat gray coat, the man who had pressed the stoppered glass into Athena's pillow himself and patted it into place like a kindness. 2 houndsmen flanked her with their pikes lowered, and behind them, unleashed, unsummoned, padding along on the long, loose legs of an animal not yet finished growing, was the half-grown wolfhound pup Kevin had been calling Alice for a joke and training, with poor success, to bite on command. The pup was not supposed to be there. Kevin had whistled her back twice already, and twice she had pretended not to hear, her great pale head down, her eyes pinned on Athena's heels with the unembarrassed devotion of an animal that has decided. Athena had raised her. Athena had pulled her out of her dam at the bad end of a hard whelping with 2 fingers and a prayer and a piece of clean linen. And the pup, who did not yet know she was supposed to be a weapon, knew that. She walked at Athena's calf the way she had walked at Athena's calf for every feeding of her short life. Kevin hissed her name a 3rd time. The pup flicked one ear and did not turn. Alvin, who noticed everything, noticed this. His mouth did a small thing it did when a plan met an unexpected variable, and then it smoothed. At the stake, they took the rope from her wrists only long enough to thread her arms behind her around the iron, and bind her again on the far side, palms outward, fingers splayed against the cold metal. The matriarch did not meet her eyes. None of them did, except Kevin, who met them too long and with the wrong kind of brightness, and Alvin, who gave her the steady, mild attention he gave a ledger. The matriarch's voice when she spoke was the voice she used at table. It was nothing personal. It was almost gentle. "By the right of the old tribute clause," she said, "for the killing of the breeding bitch Marigold and the theft of the household seed line, the kennel keeper Athena, of no surname, is given to the hollow wood at dawn, in the keeping of whatever the hollow wood keeps, that the binding be renewed for another 7 years. She paused, as if waiting for Athena to weep or beg, which would have made it cleaner. Athena did neither. She looked at the moss ring around the stone and noticed that her boots were inside it now, and that this was the first time in her life her boots had been inside a place she was meant not to go, and that the moss had not flinched. The pup sat down at her feet inside the ring as if she had been invited. "You may speak," the matriarch said, "if you wish." Athena thought about it. Her mouth was very dry. She thought about saying she had not done it, which they knew. She thought about saying Alvin had done it, which they also knew. She thought about the dog Marigold, who had been a good dog and had died foaming in Athena's lap 2 nights ago, while Athena tried to push milk and charcoal down her throat with a leather funnel. And she thought about the way the matriarch had stood in the kennel doorway watching that, and had said nothing, only nodded once at Alvin and left. "Take the pup back," Athena said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "She isn't part of this." Kevin laughed, not unkindly, the way he laughed at most things. He bent and clicked his fingers at Alice. The pup looked at his fingers, then she looked at his face. Then, with the slow, grave deliberation of a creature making its first real decision, she leaned the long, warm length of her flank against Athena's bound shin and yawned, showing every one of her young teeth, and lay down. Kevin's smile slipped half a degree. Alvin's did not. The matriarch turned and walked back down the path without speaking again, and the houndsman followed. And Kevin followed last, calling the pup once more in a voice that was beginning to find its temper. The pup did not move. The procession reached the edge of the trees and was gone, and the mist closed politely behind them, and Athena was alone in the hollow wood with a wolfhound named Alice, and the slow, not quite heartbeat of a place that had been fed for 200 years. For a long time nothing happened. The gray thinned. A finger of real light found its way down through the canopy and laid itself across the moss ring and went out again. Athena's shoulders began to ache from the angle of her arms. The pup snored lightly, the unbothered sleep of an animal who had decided her person was here, and therefore the situation was acceptable. Athena tried to count her own breaths and lost count somewhere around 40, because the count kept being interrupted by a thought she did not want to finish, which was that she had never in her life been bitten by a dog. Not once. Not as a child reaching into a whelping box. Not as a girl breaking up 2 males over a bone. Not as a woman walking unarmed into a kennel of war-trained brutes the day after they had killed a stable hand. The other servants said it like an accusation. Witch blood. Cold blood. Something wrong in her. Athena had always thought it was only that she did not flinch, and animals understood not flinching, and there was nothing more to it than that. She had told herself this for 22 years. She had been telling herself this 2 nights ago, when Marigold's eyes had rolled back, and the great body had gone soft against her thighs, and the dog had licked her wrist once, weakly, in apology for dying on her. And Athena had bent her face down into the dog's ruff, and felt, for one strange heartbeat, that something inside her own chest went still in a way her chest had never gone still before. Not a flutter, not a thread. A quiet, as if a noise she had not known she was hearing all her life had paused to listen to something else. She had thought it was grief. She thought now it might not have been only grief. The pup at her shin lifted her head. Something in the trees was breathing. Not loudly. Not the way a thing about to charge breathes. The way a thing very old breathes. Slow and considered. The inhale of an animal that has been breathing in this same grove for longer than any human standing had been alive. Athena did not see it move. She only saw, between one blink and the next, that the pattern of the mist between two particular trunks had changed, and what stood in the space the mist had vacated was tall and lean, and on 4 legs, and was not a wolf the way the kennel wolves were wolves. It was the shape wolves remembered being, before they had been bred down for war. Its coat was the color of old iron in rain. Its head came nearly to the lowest branches. Its eyes were the wrong color for an animal, a pale, unhuman gold that had a thinking in it. And the thinking was tired in a way Athena had only ever seen in very old men and in one mare she had had to put down herself. The pup did not bark. The pup pressed her face into the back of Athena's calf and went very still and did not whimper, because the pup was young, but she was not stupid, and what had walked out of the trees was not for barking at. It came forward into the moss ring on the soundless feet of something that had learned a long time ago not to make sound. It stopped 4 paces from her. It lowered its great head and breathed her in, a long, deliberate draw of air through a long, dark muzzle. And Athena watched the ribs under the iron coat lift and lower with that breath, and she felt the place in her chest where the noise of her had always been loudest. The pulse, the drum, the constant little hammer she had lived inside her whole life, go quiet. Not stop. Quiet. A stillness where her heartbeat used to be loudest, as if something had set a hand very gently over the drum and asked it, please, for just a moment, to listen. The wolf bent its 4 legs. It went down onto one knee, the way a man goes down onto one knee, and the motion was wrong on a 4-legged body, and right on this one. And as the knee touched moss, the shape of the thing thinned and rearranged the way smoke rearranges around a hand passed through it. And what knelt at the end of the motion was not a wolf any longer, but was not yet a man. Was somewhere in the long, terrible middle, fur giving way to skin in patches that did not yet know which they wanted to be. The muzzle pulling back into a jaw, the gold eyes staying gold. And on the bare skin where the pelt had receded, Athena could see scars, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, the kind of scarring that came from a body healing over the same wound again and again and again, across years without rest. He was tall, even kneeling. His hair was the same iron as the coat had been, and it fell over a face that was beautiful in the way ruined statues are beautiful, all the lines still there under what time had done to them. He breathed her in again. His eyes closed. When he spoke, his voice was the voice of a throat that had not made human sounds in a very long time, and the word he made with it should not have been a word he knew. Queen, he said. The pup whined, very softly, and pressed harder into Athena's calf. Athena, bound to a stake in a grove that had been fed her countrymen for 200 years, with her heartbeat gone quiet in her chest and a half-shifted thing kneeling at her feet calling her by a title she had never been given, found that her mouth still worked. I think, she said, you have me confused with someone else. He opened his eyes. The tired gold of them looked at her with a focus so complete it was almost an insult, the way a man dying of thirst looks at water and does not see the cup. No, he said, and the human shape of the word came easier this time, as if he were remembering how. I do not. My name is Athena. I keep the kennels. I have never been a queen of anything. "Your name," he said slowly, tasting it, "is Athena." He said it again, quieter, as if he were checking it against something. "Athena." Then, with a small, terrible courtesy, "Forgive me. I have not had a name to say in 91 years. I am out of practice." He lifted his head and looked at her properly for the first time, and she saw that whatever he was suffering, and had been suffering, and the suffering had become so old it had stopped looking like pain and started looking like weather. "But you are also queen. The two are not in competition. The Covenant knows you. I felt it under the trees before they had finished walking you in." "What covenant?" He smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent a very long time alone with a joke nobody else was alive to share. "Ah," he said, "they did not tell you." "Of course they did not tell you. They have not known for 6 generations. Even the woman who left you here this morning believed the binding was hers." The pup had relaxed by degrees against Athena's leg, which Athena noted distantly because the pup was a good barometer, and the pup had decided this kneeling thing was not a danger to her person, and the pup had been right about everything so far in her young life. Athena tried to flex her fingers behind the stake and found them numb. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He told her as the sun climbed and did not warm the grove, as the moss ring held the two of them and the dog inside it like a held breath, as her shoulders went past aching into a tingling absence of feeling. He told her that the binding the Vasari household believed they had inherited had never belonged to the Vasari household at all. The Vasari were the keepers, the wardens, the hand that brought the food. The binding itself was a covenant, and a covenant required 2 parties, and one of those parties was not a noble line at all, but a small marsh-edge people who had been driven off their water 207 years ago by a plague and a drought, and the politely armed encouragement of their high-born neighbors. The last queen of that small people had been 17 years old, and had carried a gift in her blood that the Vasari ancestors had wanted very badly, and she had refused to give it to them. And instead, on the night her village burned, she had gone into the grove that would later be called the Hollowwood, and had bound the thing that lived there to her line by a covenant that served 2 purposes. It kept the thing from coming out and eating the people who had burned her village, and it kept her line, scattered and hidden, and eventually forgotten even to itself, anchored to a piece of earth nobody could take from them, because the grove answered to her blood and to nothing else. "She was kind," he said, not looking at Athena now, looking at his own scarred hands where they rested on his knee. "She told me she was sorry. She did not have time to be more sorry than that. I was younger then. I did not understand what kindness costs the kind. I told her I would wait. I have waited. 200 years. 207. And they have been..." Athena swallowed. The next word was hard. "Feeding you." He did not answer for a moment. The not answering was the answer. Then he said, very evenly, "They send what they cannot otherwise dispose of. Thieves, inconvenient daughters, servants who have offended. The covenant does not require me to refuse." His mouth moved in something that was not a smile. "I have refused, sometimes. Those nights the household woke to find the offering still alive in the morning, and they were unhappy, and the next offering came faster. So I learned. One learns." Athena was crying. She had not noticed beginning to cry. The tears were going sideways down her temples because of the angle of her head against the stake. The pup licked at her ankle as if to clean a wound. "I am not a queen," she said. "I keep dogs. I am the daughter of a laundress, and nobody knows who my father was. I have never owned a thing in my life worth more than a knife. You have the wrong girl." "I have," he said gently, "the only girl. There are no others. Your mother's mother's mother walked out of a marsh nobody remembers the name of, and took service in a kitchen in a town 3 valleys from here, and she did not know what she carried, and her daughter did not know, and her daughter's daughter did not know, and you do not know. The line went thin. It did not break. Lines like that do not break. They wait." He looked up at her again. The tired gold of his eyes had something in it now that had not been there before. And Athena, who had grown up reading animals because animals were the only honest creatures in her life, recognized it and did not want to. "I felt the covenant come awake when they led you onto the path. I have not felt it come awake since the 17-year-old girl walked out of this grove and went home to die of her burns. I came to meet my queen. I did not come to harm you. I will not harm you. I cannot harm you. The covenant forbids it, and I would not if it did not." "Then untie me." He did not move. "The covenant," he said, "also forbids me to act on you. I cannot loose your hands. Only you can speak the words that change what the binding is, and you must speak them to me whole, not in pieces, not under fear. So I will kneel here, and you will be cold, and your shoulders will hurt, and I am sorry for it, and we will talk. Because there is one thing I must ask of you, my queen, and I must ask it before you choose anything else. Because if you choose anything else first, you will not be able to give me what I am asking." Athena, bound, weeping sideways, with a pup on her foot and her heartbeat gone strange and quiet inside her, looked down into the face of the kneeling thing the household had been feeding for 7 generations, and felt the first true edge of the day arrive. The edge the matriarch and Kevin and Alvin had not anticipated and could not have anticipated. The edge that was not their gift to give or take. "Ask," she said. He bent his head. "Release me," he said. "Not into the world, out of it. End the covenant. Let me die." The grove kept its slow, not heartbeat. The mist hung. The pup, sensing nothing of the words but everything of the silence after them, turned her great pale head and laid her chin across Athena's boot and closed her eyes. And the trust of that small, heavy weight was the only warm thing inside the moss ring. Athena breathed in and breathed out. She tried to make her mind hold what he had said, and her mind kept setting it down, the way a hand kept setting down a stone too hot to grip. End it. Let me die. The 200-year thing in the grove was asking her, the kennel girl with rope burn at her wrists, to do the one thing his keepers had spent 2 centuries building elaborate human machinery to prevent. And he was asking it not as a prisoner asking a jailer. He was asking it as a tired man asking a woman whose answer mattered. He was asking it because she was the only person alive who could give it. "Why?" she said. Her voice cracked on the word. She tried again. "Why now? Why me? If you wanted out, you have had—" She stopped. 200 years was not an argument she could finish. "Because I have not, until this morning, had anyone to ask," he said. "The covenant cannot be undone by my wanting. It can only be undone by yours. There has been no queen to want anything since the girl who bound me. And she, at the end, wanted me to live. She thought she was being merciful. She thought living was the gift." He laughed, a single dry sound, She was 17. She had not lived long enough to know what living costs a thing that cannot rest. I do not blame her. I have never blamed her. But you are here, and you are the first of her line who has stood inside this ring with a mind old enough to understand what I am asking. And I am tired. Athena, I am so tired. I have eaten people I did not want to eat for longer than the kingdom that fed them to me has had its current name. I want it to stop. I want me to stop. The recognition of you is the first thing in 100 years I have wanted, and I am asking you to end me before I want anything else from you. Because if I want anything else, I will not be able to ask for this, and the asking is the only piece of dignity I have left. Athena closed her eyes. Behind her closed eyes, she saw Marigold's brown eye, soft, dying, apologizing. She saw the matriarch's chin held high. She saw Alvin's neat gray coat. She saw the 17-year-old girl she had never met, walking out of a burning village toward a grove with a bargain in her mouth that she did not yet know was going to outlast every grandchild she would never have. She saw very clearly, with the clarity that came at the bottom of fear, the shape of the choice that was being put into her hands. And she understood, the way she understood the weight of a sick puppy without weighing it, that this was not the choice the stories had taught her to expect. She had grown up on the kitchen fire stories. The girl chained at dawn was always rescued. Sometimes she rescued herself. Sometimes a great beast turned out to be a king, and they walked out together into a crown and a marriage. Nobody in any of those stories had ever knelt at the chained girl's feet and asked, please, to be allowed to die, because the alternative to dying was wanting her, and he could not bear to want anything anymore. She opened her eyes. I need, she said carefully, because her mouth was unreliable. To think. Is that allowed? It is the only thing that is allowed, he said. I will wait. I am good at waiting. I am sorry about your shoulders. Can you, she said, at least tell me your name? If I am going to think about it, I would rather not think about it as the wolf. He was quiet a moment, his hands turned over in his lap, palms up, as if checking them for an old splinter. I have not used it in a long time, he said. If I tell it to you, you will be the only living person who knows it. And that is a weight, my queen. Are you sure? Tell me. Corin, he said. I was Corin. Corin. She tried it. The pup's ear twitched at the new sound, and the pup did not lift her head. All right, Corin. I am going to think. While I think, would you... She had to stop because her throat closed. She made it open again. Would you sit with me? The grove is cold. The pup is brave, but she is small. I do not want to think alone. He moved. The half-shift settled into more of a man and less of a wolf, though never entirely either. And he came forward on his knees, not standing, because standing would have put his height between her and the light, and he had the courtesy not to. And he settled at her side on the moss, with his back near the stake but not touching it, and he did not touch her, and the pup, after a moment of consideration, got up and walked around Athena's feet and lay down between them, against his thigh on one side and Athena's boot on the other, and stretched and sighed and accepted them both. They sat like that as the sun went up. He told her things while they sat, not pressing, not arguing his case, only answering when she asked, and sometimes offering a thing she had not asked because she had not known to ask. He told her how the household fed the grove, which she had thought she knew and had not known the full of. He told her the names of the offerings he remembered, which were not many, because forgetting was a mercy he had granted himself early. He told her about the 17-year-old queen whose name had been Mira, and how Mira had laughed once, on the night of the binding, at something he had said, and how the laugh had been the last sound of joy made inside this grove until, perhaps, the pup's small contented sigh against his thigh just now. He told her that the binding had a hinge in it, a place where the words could be turned. The binding could be ended. The binding could also be renewed, which was what the household believed they were doing every 7 years with their offerings. And they were wrong about the mechanism, but right that something happened. The binding could, if a queen chose, be rewritten. Not erased, rewritten. The covenant accepted alteration from the line that had said it. It did not accept alteration from anyone else. Rewritten how? Athena said. In any way the queen and the bound agree to. In any way they have the courage to mean. And if I rewrote it, so you walked out of here with me, free, a man, not eating people in the dark. He did not answer for a long time. When he did, his voice was very low. Then some part of what I am stays in the wood. The covenant requires a thing in the grove. If it is not me whole, it is me in part. The man who walks out with you would be less than the thing that walked in this morning. Smaller, quieter. Some of what I have been for 2 centuries would stay tied to the trees, and I would not know, day to day, what I had lost. Only that I had lost it. I would not be the thing that knelt to you. I would be a man who used to be that thing. Would you mind? I have been minding everything for 200 years. To mind one more thing, and to mind it beside you instead of inside this ring, would be... He stopped. He started again. It would be a different kind of minding. I cannot tell you it would not hurt. I can tell you it would not be this hurt. And if I end it, if I let you die, then you walk out of the wood at sunrise with the pup, and the household has no monster to feed, and the next inconvenient girl they want to be rid of, they will have to kill themselves, in the open, with their own hands, and they will find that harder than they expect. The grove will go ordinary. The moss will cross the ring. Birds will come back. I will be what people are when they stop. I do not know more than that. I have not been allowed to know more than that. And if I do nothing, if I refuse to choose, then the covenant renews on its old terms at sunrise, because the old terms are the default, and you go home to a household that wants you dead for reasons that have nothing to do with me. And I eat the next offering they send. And I am sorry, Athena, but I will, because the covenant does not let me starve. I have tried. She turned her face toward him without lifting her head from the stake. He was very close. The scars on his cheek were a map of every wound he had healed from over 2 centuries, layered like silt. His eyes were the color of late honey held up to a candle. She could see, now, in his face, the shape of the boy he had been before any of this. The line of a jaw that had once smiled easily. The mouth that had once made a 17-year-old girl laugh on the worst night of her life. She could see, too, the hollowing. The thing he had said about being hollowed out had not been a metaphor. There were rooms in him with the doors taken off the hinges and the furniture gone. Corin, she said. Yes. I am not going to let you die. He closed his eyes. Something moved across his face that was not relief and was not protest. Was the look of a man hearing a verdict he had braced for in one direction and received in the other, and now had to find a new way to stand inside his own body. My queen. No, Listen, I am not finished. I am not going to let you die in this grove, having eaten my countrymen for 200 years as your last act, with the household that did this to you still standing on top of the hill, warm in their beds. That is not a dying. That is them winning. I am not going to give them that, and I am not going to let you give them that either. So no, not today. Not like this. Athena, I am not finished. I said I would think. I am thinking. The hinge you spoke of. The rewriting. I want to use it. I want to rewrite the covenant. I want you to walk out of here with me at sunrise, and I want the household to find that the thing in the grove is no longer hungry and no longer theirs. And I want you to be, for whatever days you have left as a man who is not eating anyone. And I know what it costs you. I heard you. Some part of you stays. I am asking you to pay that. I am asking, and I know I have no right to ask. And I am asking anyway, because the alternative is that you die having only ever been the thing they made you. And I will not let that be the shape of your story when there is another shape available, and it is in my mouth to speak. He was shaking. She had not noticed when it had begun. The pup had noticed. The pup was pressed against his thigh, making the small, steady humming whine a dog makes against a grieving body. The noise that was older than language and meant only, here, here, here. You do not know me, he said, not as a refusal, as a fact he wanted on the record. I know you knelt, she said. I know you asked instead of took. I know you have been asked nothing for 200 years, and the first thing you did with being asked was ask back. I know enough. It will not be. He stopped. It will not be the thing the stories want. I will not be a king. There is no kingdom. I will be quieter than I am now, smaller. I do not know what kind of company I will be. I keep dogs, Athena said. I am good with quiet company. A sound came out of him that she thought at first was a sob, and realized, after, was a laugh. It was a rusted laugh, the laugh of an instrument left in a cellar. But it was a laugh, and the pup lifted her head at it and thumped her tail once against the moss as if approving. The words, he said. His voice was unsteady. The words have to be yours. I cannot give them to you. I can tell you when they are right, but you have to find them. She thought. She thought about Mira, 17, walking into this grove with her village burning behind her, choosing life for the thing in the trees because life was the only gift she had left to give. She thought about the kennel where she had grown up, the smell of straw and warm dog and lavender oil. The way she had never once been bitten because, perhaps, somewhere in her blood the grove had already known her, and the animals of the world had already agreed she was not a thing that needed defending against. She thought about Marigold dying in her lap. She thought about the household waiting on the hill for the binding to renew, drinking their morning tea, certain. She thought about Alvin's neat gray coat. She thought about the moss that had not flinched when her boots had crossed it. She thought about the pup choosing her in front of Kevin's clicking fingers. She thought about Corin's hands, scarred, palms up, checking themselves for splinters that were not there. By the line of Mira, she said slowly, feeling the shape of the words in her mouth before she said them aloud. And by my standing in it, which I did not know and which I claim now, I changed the binding. The grove keeps what it has been given. It does not get more. The thing that has lived here lives in part still, in the wood, in the moss, in the iron of this stake, in the patience of the trees. The rest of him walks out with me. He does not eat. He is not fed. He is not owed. The household above this grove has no further claim on him and no further claim on me. And any offering they send into this wood from this dawn forward will find only trees, and the trees will keep the offering safe until I come for them. Because I am the queen of this line, and I say so. The grove listened. She did not know how she knew it was listening. She knew. The mist between the trunks did not move and yet attended. The pup had gone very still and watchful, ears forward. Corin had bowed his head until his forehead nearly touched the moss. "Is that," she said, suddenly small, "is that the right shape? Did I?" "It is the right shape," he said into the moss. "You have a gift for shapes. Keep going." "There is more?" "There is an end. A binding has to have an end to be a binding. Tell it what ends it." She thought again. She had not expected this part. She thought of the 17-year-old who had not given the covenant an end because she had not believed she would die of her burns and had wanted the binding to outlast her, not knowing it would outlast everyone. She thought of the way endings made things bearable, the way a kennel girl could sit with a dying dog because the dying was, mercifully, a thing that ended. "It ends," she said, "when he does. When the man who walks out with me ends, the binding ends with him. The grove goes back to being trees. The line of Mira is released from its keeping. No daughter of mine, if I have one, inherits this. It stops with us." She paused. The next part rose up in her without permission, and she did not edit it. "And if I die first, the binding ends then too. The grove does not get to keep him alone. Not for one more night." Something in the wood let out a long breath. It was not wind. There was no wind in the hollow wood. It was the breath of a thing that had been holding itself in a particular shape for 207 years and had, just now, been told it could put the shape down. The ropes at Athena's wrists loosened of themselves and fell away. She brought her arms forward slowly, because they did not entirely belong to her anymore, and she set her hands on her own knees and looked at them. Kennel girl's hands, cracked nails, lavender oil under the cuticles, and she thought, distantly, that they did not look like a queen's hands. And then she thought further that perhaps queen's hands had always looked like this, and the stories had been wrong. Corin lifted his head. He had not moved otherwise. He was waiting, she realized, for her to decide whether she wanted him near her, now that she did not have to be near him. "Come here," she said. He came, slowly, the way an animal that has been beaten comes to a hand it has decided to trust, with the whole of its body involved in the deciding. He knelt closer, and she lifted one of her cracked hands and laid it against the side of his face, scarred cheek under her palm, and felt the warmth of him, which was a man's warmth now, not a furnace, not a wolf's banked coal, only the warmth of a tired body that had been given permission to be tired in a new way. The stillness in her chest, where her heartbeat had once been loudest, deepened, settled, became a quiet she could live inside. Not an absence. A held space, a room with the lamp turned low and the door open. "Hello," she said. "Hello, my queen. Don't call me that out loud where anyone can hear. It will get us both killed." "Noted. Athena is fine." Athena. The pup, sensing the new shape of things, stood up and shook herself thoroughly from nose to tail, scattering moss, and went over to the iron stake and lifted her leg against it with the unceremonious finality of a young animal closing a chapter. And Athena laughed. A startled, wet laugh, and Corin's mouth did the rusted laugh again, and the grove, around all three of them, began very quietly to allow a bird. It was a thrush. It landed high in the canopy, looked down at the scene with the suspicion of a creature that had been told for generations that this place was off limits, decided it had been misinformed, and began to sing. They sat through the rest of the morning. There was no rush. The household above was not expecting them back. The household above was, in fact, cooking a celebratory lunch, because Alvin had assured the matriarch that the binding had been renewed and there had been no scream, which was unusual but acceptable, the binding sometimes being polite about its food. The matriarch had nodded and ordered lamb. They had at least until sundown before anyone noticed that the kennel girl had not screamed, because the kennel girl was sitting on moss with a wolfhound pup and a man and a thrush, working out a problem. The problem was practical. Corin could not walk back up to the estate and present himself. The matriarch and Kevin and Alvin would need a story. The grove would need to look, to the casual eye, like a grove that had eaten its girl as instructed. Athena would need to be a girl who had not been eaten, which was harder to disguise than a grove, because girls were three-dimensional and groves were not. "They will send Alvin first," Athena said. She was sitting cross-legged now, the pup's head in her lap, working her fingers through the long pale fur in the way that calmed both of them. Corin sat across from her with his back against a tree, one leg stretched out, the other knee up, his hands resting on it. He was wearing, by this point, a dark, rough garment that had not been there an hour ago, and that neither of them had commented on, because the grove appeared to be willing to provide certain courtesies, and asking about them seemed rude. "Tomorrow morning, to check that the bones are picked clean. He likes to be sure of his work." "Alvin is the steward." "Alvin poisoned Marigold and put the vial in my cot." "Then Alvin," said Corinne mildly, "is a man with a problem." "I do not want him hurt." He looked at her. "You do not?" "I want him exposed. I want the matriarch to know what he has been doing in her name without her knowing. And I want Kevin to know that his pup chose me over him in front of witnesses. And I want all three of them to live with the knowledge that the kennel girl walked out of the Hollywood. I do not want bodies. Bodies make martyrs. I want them to have to keep eating breakfast across from each other, knowing what they did. That is worse." Corin considered her. There was something in his face that had not been there earlier. Something that was not quite a smile, but was the country a smile came from. "My queen has a turn for justice. My queen keeps dogs. Dogs you do not punish for their nature. You change the conditions of the kennel. Same principle." He made the rusted laugh again. The pup, hearing it, thumped her tail. They worked it out as the sun crossed the sky. Athena would not return at sundown, because returning at sundown would invite questions she was not yet ready to answer. She would return at sunrise the next day, which was the canonical hour for the binding to release any leftovers, and she would walk out of the grove alone, with the pup, with rope burn at her wrists and moss in her hair, and the look of a girl who had survived a thing she should not have survived. Corin would not walk out with her then. He would wait. He would walk out separately, on his own feet, 2 days later, into the village at the foot of the estate, where Athena's mother's sister kept a small inn and would, Athena was reasonably certain, take in a quiet man with old eyes and ask no questions if Athena vouched for him. From the inn he would write her letters, on inn paper, in a hand she would teach him to relearn, because he had not held a pen in 200 years, and the muscle for it would have to be rebuilt. They would not rush. They had, between them, agreed not to rush. The not rushing was part of the rewriting. He had been hurried into being a monster for 2 centuries, and she had been hurried out of her own life at dawn this morning. And between them, They had earned a slowness. "And when the matriarch demands to know," Corin said, "how you survived." "I will tell her the truth," Athena said. "I will tell her that the thing in the grove looked at me and decided I was not for eating, and I will let her sit with that. And I will let Alvin sit with that. And I will let Kevin sit with that, in front of the whole household at supper, with the pup at my feet. And I will let them work out their own theology about what kind of girl gets refused by the Hollowood. They will arrive, on their own, at which they were going to arrive there anyway. I have been hearing that word my whole life. At least now it will be earned." "You do not seem afraid of being called witch." "I have been called witch by women who have never been bitten by anything more dangerous than a goose. The word has been losing power on me since I was 12. He laughed properly that time. It was less rusted. The thrush, encouraged, was joined by a second thrush. The pup snored. The afternoon went. The light shifted. They ate nothing because the grove did not provide food and they had not thought to. And Athena did not feel hunger, which she noted and did not investigate, because some things would explain themselves later, and some would not. And she was learning, fast, which were which. As the light reddened and began to fail, Corin stood for the first time. He stood slowly, the way a man stands who has not stood on 2 legs in a long time, and is testing whether the legs remember. They did. He stood tall, taller than she had expected even kneeling, and the dark garment the grove had given him hung on him in the way clothes hang on people who have been thin for too long. He held out his hand to her. "Walk to the edge with me," he said. "Not out. To the edge. I want to see how far I can go before the binding feels it. So I know, when I come out for you in 2 days, whether the changes took." She let him pull her to her feet. Her legs did not entirely work either. She leaned on him a moment. He held her up. The pup, scrambling up, wedged between their ankles as if to officially endorse the arrangement. They walked. He went first. She watched his shoulders for the moment they would tighten, the moment the old leash would catch. They reached the moss ring and crossed it, and he did not tighten. They reached the first ring of trees and passed it, and he did not tighten. They reached the place where the path began to lift toward the estate, and there, at last, he stopped. Not because he had to, but because the air there smelled of the household's cooking fires and human voices were faintly carrying down the wind, and he was not yet ready for human voices. "I can go further," he said. "I can feel I can. The grove is keeping its peace. The rest of me is mine." "How does it feel?" He thought about it. "Lighter," he said. "Lesser. Both. I cannot tell you which is more. I will be able to tell you in a year. A year is fine." He turned to her. The dying light was on his scarred face. His hair, in this light, was less iron and more the color of a hearth gone to embers. She looked up at him and felt, in the held quiet where her heartbeat used to be loudest, a slow, warm settling, the weight of something setting itself down at last. "Athena," he said. "Yes. Thank you for not letting me die today. Thank you for asking instead of taking." He bent. He did not kiss her. He laid his forehead very gently against hers and held it there, the way a horse leans its head against the chest of a person it has decided to stay with. And they stood like that as the sun finished going, and the pup sat at their feet and yawned, and somewhere up the hill the household was eating lamb and congratulating itself. She walked back into the grove with him for the night, because he had asked her not to walk up to the estate in the dark and she had agreed, and because she was not yet ready to be a girl who had not been eaten and would rather, for one more night, be a girl who was sitting on moss with a man and a dog. And they sat together against the same tree he had leaned on earlier, and the pup arranged herself across both their laps. And Athena slept, eventually, with her cheek against the rough garment over his shoulder. And Corin did not sleep, because 200 years of not sleeping was not a habit a single afternoon could break. But he closed his eyes, and he listened to her breathing, and to the pup's breathing, and to the small, soft sound of his own breathing, which was new to him, which he had not heard in this grove ever before because there had never been anything else here breathing alongside him to make his own breath audible by contrast. And he thought distantly that this was what Mira had wanted for him 207 years ago, when she had chosen life. She had been right in the end. She had only been early. Sunrise came. It came thinly through the canopy, the same gray she had walked in by the day before, but the gray had a different quality to it now. The quality of a morning that had decided to be a morning rather than a verdict. Athena woke against Corin's shoulder. The pup was already awake, sitting up, ears forward, watching the path. She had heard, before either of them, the careful footsteps of a man in a neat gray coat coming down the path to inspect the bones. "Stay here," Athena murmured to Corin. "Both of you. Let me." "Athena, I keep dogs. I know how to walk into a kennel." She stood. She straightened her dress, which had moss on it, and would stay having moss on it because moss was, she had decided, going to be part of her wardrobe from now on. She walked to the moss ring. She stepped out of it. She walked along the path toward the sound of Alvin's polite footsteps, and she met him at the bend, where the trees thinned, and she watched his face go through several careful arrangements before it settled on the one he had decided to wear, which was concern. "Athena," he said, "my dear girl, you are alive." "I am, Alvin. How?" His eyes flicked past her, into the grove, scanning. "How extraordinary. We must take you to the house at once. The matriarch will want to—" "Alvin." He stopped. He had not been used to being interrupted by her. Something in the way she had said his name had been new. He looked at her properly, perhaps for the first time in the years she had worked under him. And he saw, she thought, that the kennel girl had walked into the grove yesterday, and someone else had walked out, and that the someone else was not yet finished walking out, and that he was going to have to spend the rest of his life across a table from her, trying to work out what exactly he was looking at. "The grove," she said evenly, "did not want me. The grove returned me. The pup is with me. We are going up to the house now. You will walk behind us. You will not speak. When we reach the house, the matriarch will ask you what happened, and you will say that the grove returned the kennel girl, and you will not, Alvin, mention the vial that you placed in my cot, because if you do, I will mention it. And the grove and I have an understanding now about what is owed and to whom, and you do not want to be on the wrong end of that understanding. Do we agree?" Alvin looked at her. His mouth opened, then it closed. He had been a steward for 30 years. He knew when to speak and when to bow, and he had, in the last 10 seconds, recategorized her, and the recategorization showed in the small, careful adjustment of his shoulders. "We agree," he said. "Good. Walk behind." She went up the path, the pup at her heel. Alvin, after a moment, behind. Halfway up she paused, only for a heartbeat, and looked back into the grove and saw, between two trunks, the shape of a man standing very still in the half-light, watching her go, his hand raised, the scarred palm turned toward her. She lifted her own hand. He lowered his. She walked on. The household waited above, and the matriarch and Kevin, and the long, slow project of being a girl who had not been eaten, and after that, the long, slow project of writing letters to a man at her aunt's inn, and after that, the longer, slower project of two people learning what they were to each other, when neither of them was anything they had been before. And none of this was the shape any story she had grown up on had taught her to expect. And she found, walking up the path with the pup at her heel and the held quiet steady inside her chest, that she did not mind. There were a few moments in this one that have stayed with me. The pup choosing her in front of Kevin's clicking fingers, the rusted laugh in the grove, the forehead pressed gently against forehead at the edge of the trees, with the cooking fires of the household carrying down the wind. I would love to know which one landed for you. See you next time.